Hello, and welcome to the Earth Podcast. My name's Jason Adams. Today I'm joined by Sam Hall. Sam is the Vice President of Damage Prevention Institute, having joined the CGA in June of 2022. With over 2 decades of industry experience and a robust regulatory background, Sam leads the development of stakeholder metrics and peer-reviewed accreditation processes aimed at enhancing the efficiencies within damage prevention. His work focuses on collaboration with the industry leaders and CGA members to benefit the entire damage prevention industry. Sam's career highlights include significant contributions to natural gas and hazardous liquid pipeline safety regulation, emphasizing the importance of shared responsibility and accountability in damage prevention. We're so lucky to have Sam join us today. I'm really excited to have this conversation. Sam, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Jason. I'm excited to be here. Appreciate it.
Good. Sam, so I've only known you for a short period of time. I'd love to learn a little bit more about your background and how you kind of ended up in this role of the vice president of the DPI.
Yeah, great. I actually cut my teeth at the U.S. Department of Transportation. And early in my career, I was actually focused on mapping. I was a GIS analyst back when GIS was not available on the internet for navigation and those kinds of things. You might remember MapQuest. Those of your audience who are old enough to remember MapQuest and those things. Those things were not quite online yet. We were making pipeline maps. I was actually a contractor that started with DOT, and we were creating a national pipeline mapping system back then. And within a couple of years, I was hired into the DOT as a federal employee and really focused my early career there on mapping and GIS. Over the years, I started to gain a better understanding of pipeline safety issues broadly, pipeline regulations certainly, and really started to get more and more into some of the softer side of pipeline safety, meaning not the engineering side, not talking about material science, but instead talking about things like public awareness, grant making, and then of course damage prevention. So for many years working with PHMSA, I worked a lot in damage prevention issues and had the privilege of working closely with the Common Ground Alliance and the many stakeholders that are represented by the Common Ground Alliance. Really formed some very strong relationships across the industry, both with CGA staff, but then also across the excavation and owner-operator communities and the locating communities. So really was able to get a good sense of how people see the world, how they perceive damage prevention through their own lenses, and how we can work together to try to solve some of our collective problems through collaboration and accountability. So this has been a really nice fit. It's been a great change coming over to the Common Ground Alliance, and it's been a really nice way to use some of the skills that I gained at DOT.
Absolutely. It's funny as you talk about GIS, we use that a lot now. It's probably just part of the DNA of damage prevention. But I remember a time when it wasn't, right? When we used map books and grid books and we had, everything in paper. So it's interesting now that the DPI is here because I know a lot of the focus is really about making great decisions, great data, education. I think it'd be good for our audience. Can you kind of explain the core mission of the DPI, the Damage Prevention Institute, and how it aims to kind of transform the current state of underground utility damage prevention?
Absolutely, yeah. So it's really important to understand that the DPI, the Damage Prevention Institute, it's a part of CGA. It's not separate from CGA. It is a program within CGA. And to that end, it is designed to further CGA's mission, and it is designed to function in the same way that other CGA programs do, through consensus, through the participation of our stakeholders, the 16 stakeholder groups that we represent. So that's the first thing I really wanted to say is that the DPI goal is the same as the CGA goal. I mean, it really is. We're all part of the same thing. The other part to really, the other thing that I think really you need to understand what the DPI is to understand the DIRT database, the Damage Information Reporting Tool, which for maybe part of your audience that might not be familiar, that's a database that CGA manages of voluntarily submitted data from our many stakeholders, whether they be members of CGA or not. The data that is submitted into that database pertains to excavation damages, right? So we collect on average about 300,000 records on an annual basis, sometimes more, sometimes less. And we analyze that information in the damage information reporting tool on an annual basis. And we produce some really wonderful reports that give us some fantastic insights into what's actually happening out in the real world. The DPI takes that a step further, right? It takes a couple of things a step further. One is the data. DPI is based on dirt. It is a version of dirt. And the power of the DPI is that we can collectively, with the input of our members and the participants in the DPI, decide what data we want to collect above and beyond what is in the typical dirt database. We can collect lots of stuff in there, right? We can talk about things like who your customer was when you were working on this job, what kind of contract you were working under, what technology were you using as part of that excavation project or as part of that SUE project or as part of your locating project program. We can collect a lot of additional information in the DPI, of course, with the input and buy-in of our members. This is not something that we do without the say-so of our members and our board, of course. But the vision behind the DPI is really to start to take the second component of this besides dirt. But when we think about what CGA really is focused on, it's focused on shared responsibility of all of the stakeholders in the damage prevention community. We must work together to accomplish our goals. We cannot stand as silos. What that means is that it's not only a shared responsibility, but there is shared accountability built into this, right? Responsibility creates accountability. So when we think about the DPI, we've got a couple of opportunities. We can collect a lot of information that we can't collect through the regular dirt database. We can do that much more nimbly. And we can analyze that information for some insights that we simply can't get from the dirt database. And the idea being that we want to help to understand some of the systemic challenges that we're all facing in the damage prevention community. I can get into that a little bit more. Beyond that, we're really focused on creating that accountability. So participants in the DPI have to come in and become accredited by essentially having the proper policies in place, the proper programs in place within their organizations. And then to maintain that accreditation, they have to do a couple of things. One is submit data to us on a monthly basis through the DIRT database. That monthly supply of data is an incredibly powerful tool because instead of getting a 1 year or an annual snapshot of data from the DIRT database, now we're getting monthly reports that we can kind of look at in near real time, right? Near real time. It's not going to be perfect real time. It is always going to be a month and years, but it's more timely information. And then we can also, part of accreditation and part of maintaining accreditation for DPI participants is to tell us how they're doing on very specific metrics, right? Self-report your performance on your damage prevention responsibilities to the other stakeholders in the damage prevention process. By doing that, we create accountability, right? What gets measured gets managed. And if people are measuring their performance on various components of their responsibilities in the damage prevention community, their natural inclination is going to be to improve their performance in those areas. Beyond that, then of course, that accountability between individual companies. Now we can start to take a look at the data that we collect through the DPI and start to draw some pretty significant global conclusions, right? What kinds of contracts lead to better outcomes? What kinds of technologies lead to better outcomes? What kinds of cultural elements lead to better outcomes within these organizations? Once we can kind of gather that information and we can synthesize it and create knowledge from it, right? We can then spread that knowledge and say, here's how you reduce your excavation damages by working with other people. These are the kinds of tools that work well, the kinds of contract vehicles that work well, the kinds of technologies that appear to be really driving change. So, the DPI is such an opportunity to take CGA's mission and really expand on it with a cadre of companies and organizations that are willing to put their cards on the table and say, I am doing what I'm supposed to do. And if I am failing, I would like to understand how, why, where, and what we can do collectively to fix that. Then, beyond that value, just for those individual organizations that are participating, we have that global value that says, all right, here's what we can learn from data. So It's an expansion of CGA's capabilities to understand what's happening in the real world and to help our stakeholders and our members within CGA to do the right thing and to be transparent about that work and to be accountable to one another.
Wow, that was such a very thorough answer to a very simple question that I tell you, there were so many big points in it that I kind of want to hit on some of that was there. One of the things that I've always really enjoyed about participating in the damage prevention is a lot of this is just really kind of peer reviewed, right? We really hold each other accountable. And it's nice that we have this guiding organization like the CGA that says, okay, we want to all get together, come together, have conversations, really try to figure out how we can all work together. Because at the end of the day, our main goal, whether we're a software company, we're a utility company, we're a professional locator, we're all trying to figure out how can we reduce damages, right? That's the goal. I think the spearhead part of the conversation of reducing 50% in 5 years by the CGA, not only is it a really nice little marketing thing, it's a real achievable goal.
Yes.
And I don't think the way that you kind of mentioned it, what we can measure, we can manage, I think is a wonderful statement. On our side of this equation, what we see a lot is great data leads to great decisions. And I see right now that the CGA is kind of in the infancy of really trying to take what dirt was and really make it a more productive collection of data. And that really requires kind of volunteer people submitting this data. I'm kind of interested in your observations of how we get people to provide that data, how that's coming along, maybe where it had been, where we are today, and where you see that going in the future.
Sure, sure. Well, collecting the information really depends on getting participants into the DPI, right? There have to be companies who are willing to say, I believe in this model. I believe in not only shared responsibility, but in shared accountability. And I believe that the way we get to shared accountability is through data and through open, honest measurement of our performance. And there are many, many, many companies who believe that very strongly. This is not a cultural challenge, right? Most companies want to do the right thing. They want to be able to demonstrate, whether it be to their shareholders, to their customers, to their clients, whatever it might be. They want to be able to demonstrate that they are performing at a very high level and that they will continue to do so, right? So part of what is attractive about the DPI is that facility owner operators, contractors, excavators, and contract locators can come together and mutually agree to share information with one another about their performance. So, for example, if I'm a facility owner operator and I'm a project owner on, say, a build out of natural gas distribution pipelines or something like that, I can participate in the DPI free of charge as long as I'm a member of the Common Ground Alliance. And then I can encourage my contractors to also participate in the DPI, which gives us then it gives the company, the facility owner operator, and those contractors, locators and excavators, the opportunity to share performance information with one another in an easy to use system. Here's what our damages look like. Here's what kinds of technology we're using. Here's our experiences in the field. This is where we're having problems, and this is where we're having successes too, right? So I think getting data into the system, the value to our participants is really in one, demonstrating your performance and being able to see your performance against your peers. Also, in being able to demonstrate your performance to your customers. If you're a contractor, you want to be able to show your customers that you are performing at a high level. And then you want to have a feather in your cap because all of our DPI participants are high performers, right? You don't join the DPI unless you're serious and you're ready to do this in the first place. Now, they are high performers, there's no question about that, but we can all improve, and we are all facing some really challenging systemic issues across damage prevention that really hinder anyone's ability to do a perfect job, right? So the other element of this that I think is really powerful is not only being able to say, hey, I do well, and I do well against my peers, and now I can sell this as a marketing point, or I can demonstrate empirically that I'm a good company. I'm somebody you want to do business with. You can also then feel comfortable that someone is out there going, all right, so your performance looks like this. how does that compare to performance of other people over here? And why are we seeing those differences in performance? Because all of these companies want to improve their performance. And in many cases, they've done an exceptional job. I would say in all cases, they've done an exceptional job of improving what they can do for themselves, right? But then to be able to have some insights into how other stakeholders in the damage prevention process can modify their behavior collectively to help solve some of the challenges that we have, whether that be proper use of the 811 system and proper use of the ticketing process, whether it be proper structure of contracts to compensate for the right practices in the field that help prevent excavation damages, whatever it might be. We have this ability then to not only say, hey, I can show you what your performance looks like against your peers, but I can also show you why good performers are good performers and what enables and empowers that good performance.
Yeah, I mean, what a great point. I think if you look at the business of damage prevention, right? A lot of times we get together and we talk about, hey, we're really trying to be safe, we're trying to be smart. All that's real, but we have a real business that runs here, right? We have to make sure that we can perform and do it at a level that's achieving our goals. And I think having a bar to be able to be set to say, hey, listen, we really are trying maybe to reduce damages or whatever that process is, when you could look at other peers in your industry and say, how are they doing? And then a lot of these companies, which I really have always enjoyed, will talk openly about what they're doing, what their investment looks like, saying, hey, this is the cost for us in order to provide this level of service. I think that's incredibly important for many reasons, not just the idea of reducing damages, but as a business owner, you need to build a repeatable model that actually has value. And when you do that, then you'll see organizations say, hey, I want to do business with this company, which oftentimes is overlooked because we always want to talk about the noble act of reducing damages. But the conversation has to end if a business can't do it in an effective way that still allows them to be profitable and have their services. So I think the DPI, one of the backdoor values that people often don't see is the ability to say, how am I performing? Do I reach certain standards? And what's my investment to reach those standards? Because they need to know if that's a business they want to continue at the level of what the expectations need to be for
That's it.
safety. And so yeah, I love it. I think we never had tools like this 20 years ago, right? We were just like, let's give a guy a laptop and we're really hoping he goes out to the field and works effectively. We're crossing our fingers. And today we could say, let's be certain that the person we're putting on site is competent and know what the goals are, has as much information available to them as possible so they can perform at the highest level. I don't think we get there unless there's an organization like the CGA pushing the agenda to say, this is what quality looks like. This is what we have to set the bar at. And so, I love the role that the DPI is playing. I'm incredibly excited. I know one of the big initiatives that I like is also you did that measure and then really kind of understand how we affect performance. I love the fact that you're going down the education road too.
Yes.
I think once we identify lots of challenges, and look, there's a ton of data, we're seeing that more and more. But then the question is, what do you do and how do you do it? And I know a big push by the CGA is really starting to bring up education and training for everyone and really making that part of not just the educational message, but the marketing message as well. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on
Yeah,
that.
absolutely. So education training is really just such a key component of damage prevention, right? You have to know how to behave in the field, especially as an excavator, certainly, because those are the people who are at most risk of being involved in a damage because they're the ones digging, right? But beyond excavators, everyone needs to be trained on what their jobs look like, right? We've heard of a lot of initiatives in the locating industry, right, to make sure that there are some standards that are developed for locators. We've seen certainly a lot of focus on the part of facility owner operators to ensure that their service providers are trained. And the perfect example of that, of course, is in the pipeline industry, where you have operator qualifications and the like that ensure that people that are doing certain tasks are qualified to do those tasks. Training is a huge deal. We back in 2019, NAPSR, the National Association of Pipeline Safety Representatives, which is the state pipeline safety regulators, came up with a resolution that said we need to educate excavators to a standard. And then that got pushed over to PHMSA, the Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration at DOT. And PHMSA said, well, we're not probably the right people to do that. We're a pipeline safety organization, and training excavators is critically important, but it's not really in our wheelhouse. And of course, PHMSA had a strong relationship with Common Ground Alliance since its inception and said, CGA, can you help with this? CGA eagerly jumped at that, and we put together a task team where we started looking at where are the gaps in training, especially for excavators. When I say training for excavators, I want to be very clear. It is not the excavator's responsibility in every case to prevent excavation damage. That's not what this is about. It's not targeting excavators because they are the problem. It's about providing resources to excavators that they really do need in the field. And when you talk to excavators and excavator associations, they will certainly tell you that training materials are really critical and they want to have access to it. So we pulled together a cadre of people, as we always do at CGA. We get our stakeholders together. We get best thought leaders in the industry together to start talking about what do we got to do. And we came up with a plan, a very detailed strategy for producing training materials for excavators. There is a lot of training out there that is available. There are companies that focus on damage prevention training, right? And that is not something that we want to compete with at all. What we're interested in doing is helping to identify where the gaps are in excavator training and education and try to fill those gaps with some simple, easy, short video modules that train people on what they need to do. Our first module that we produced was on hand digging, and that's been tested and is now available. It's been tested in New York, and it received some great fanfare because there really hasn't been adequate training available for how to properly hand dig. There are many other examples of where we can help to fill in some of those gaps. Our goal is absolutely not to supplant the training programs of 811 centers or of individual organizations that have robust training programs at all. It is to augment the training resources that are available across our entire industry. And we're, of course, using Coursetra as our learning management system, as you well know, and that is working quite well. Our goal is to make sure that these training resources are available to whomever wishes to use them free of charge. The training modules can be incorporated into existing training. There's no licensing associated with it. Take this stuff and train people to do well in the field, and we believe really strongly that can change the game significantly.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's I think it's really I didn't know the whole story of how it ended up from over the one organization to PHMSA, then the relationship there. It makes perfect sense. It's interesting. I think as we start to look at training stuff that you're doing there, one of the things that we have found out, especially with using Coursetra, is you're now creating a great pool of additional data now because now you're starting to see is the stuff that I'm training on, is it having an effect out there, right? And so one of the things that we were talking about earlier was dirt and how there's that database of really what we like to consider incidents, right? Because in today's modern world, we work so much on trying to figure out how we can use like large language models like a chat GPT and stuff, and how we can start leveraging data to be smarter, to make better decisions. And what I always found intriguing was that we usually just had like ticket information and then we had just little bits and pieces of damage information, but we never really had the surrounding factors, right? What was this person's qualifications before they were on the field? Could we affect their behavior if we knew what we could just tell them one or two things about hand digging or something like that? Now the CGA and the DPI are going to have this vast pool of information, and then we will not only be able to help educate, but you'll see if it's being effective. And to me, that's the sweet spot because now we're saying, I don't think you can reduce damages by 50% in 5 years by doing the same behavior over and over and over and just saying, what you have to do is collectively say, hey, we all agree if we behave this way, it will perform better. And we can do that. So I'm so happy that the CGA not only made the commitment to say, hey, I really want to get out in the education and training space, but I want to do it in such a way that we can actually see if it's effective and then how to move the meter forward so we can be even more effective. So, I applaud the effort the CGA and DPI have made there. The next one that we were talking about, I do think is dirt's close, right? I love the idea that dirt's now a month in arrears. We can look through this data. As a tech guy, what I want is I want real-time access to high quality data, because that's the pot of gold for us. Knowing if there was an incident, that triggers all the downward modules of what we're looking at. So I'm curious, as we start to move forward, what's the vision of how data is playing an effect at the CGA and specifically at the DPI? Are there any big goals or anything there? And what can we look forward to in the upcoming year or two?
Well, there are. So it's really essential that, when I talk about the DPI right now, it's very much in its infancy. I mean, we kicked this thing off in January of 23, so we're about a year old now, and we're taking a very deliberately slow approach to developing, what data we collect, how we collect that information, and then what we can do with it. And the reason we're taking that slow approach is that we want to ensure that we have the buy-in of our stakeholders and of our members at CGA. We're a member-driven organization, and there is absolutely no appetite within our organization for having requirements shoved down anyone's throats, right? We all need to be there to create our own requirements. I say it over and over that the DPI is ours to build together within the CGA. We will build this thing to do what we want it to do. So to that end, when we think about data, one of the biggest things we need to do is focus on data quality and really improving the quality of the information that gets reported into DIRT, generally speaking. And in the DPI, we have a couple of mechanisms to really improve data quality. We more or less, through tricks of programming, require when you submit a damage into the Damage Prevention Institute through DIRT that you fill out some fields that in the traditional DIRT database are not required. So we do require some fields to be filled in that are not required traditionally. And that really, you'd be shocked when you stop saying unknown and you start actually putting a reason for what happened there, and you force that, you start getting much higher quality data. We also are really focused in terms of data quality on making sure that root cause data quality in particular is quite high. The DIRT report can point to a lot of root causes. We can understand that locating, for example, late locates or mismarks are a tremendous problem. What we can't do very well in the absence of super high quality data is understand why that mismark occurred. Was it a maps and records issue, right? Was it, and to be able to get to those answers, what we need is the people who submit data into DIRT to go all the way down into that root cause analysis, or 27 root causes, and select the root cause, right? The more granular we can get there and the more accurate we can be in terms of what we are collecting, the better our conclusions can be when we draw them, right? I mean, we can definitively say, yes, it's locating and marking. And of that locating and marking challenge, 30% of it is because of bad maps and records, for example, just spitballing. But, so I think data quality is a big deal, and improving the quality of the information that we collect is huge. We also, there's real interest in companies understanding their own data. And there's tremendous power in that alone. Whether we collectively use data to draw conclusions or not, it is going to take an effort on the part of every company that's involved in damage prevention to improve their processes and to reduce damages if we're ever going to achieve this 50 and 5 goal. We all have to pitch in and we all have to do that. So data can really help us do that. What gets measured gets managed. And the more we decide we want to measure, the other end of that quote, what gets measured gets managed, is really that, you can't measure everything. And sometimes you shouldn't be measuring things that you are measuring, right? So we really have to think carefully about, what gets measured gets managed. Let's really be smart about what we are measuring to make sure it's valuable to measure, and that it's possible to measure. So what's exciting about the data element of this, of course, we're starting new with the DPI. It's a brand new program. And as we collect with our members, define those elements of the DPI, the data that we are going to collect and how we're going to analyze that, it becomes a member-driven data storehouse, a place where we can start to draw conclusions that matter to us, that we can actually take action on. And if you've been in the damage prevention industry as long as you and I have, you know what these things are. We just can't point to any empirical data that supports the decisions that we have to make collectively, So, being able to have empirical data that demonstrates the value of technology, of good contracts, of good corporate culture or organizational culture is just huge. It's just huge. It's gonna drive 50
Yeah,
and 5 because 50 and 5 is about behavior, and behavior is about culture. It's about what you intend to do and then doing it. So, the more we can do that by demonstrating with data that when you do intend to do good things actually happen, the better off we'll be in pushing that model across the entire industry.
absolutely. I think you and I have been around so long. We were talking about this earlier. It's funny. I remember training
Yeah.
people how to use a mouse. Right. That's like you got to click over here, and we were showing that now today. And what's always nice is when you get generational changes that come into our industry. We're starting to see it as you go to the CGA events and you're on the floor. You see a younger group of people coming in, people who have grown up with an iPhone in their pocket, people that are using large language models to help assist in their workflow. So I think the idea of where data has value resonates more in that group than it ever has. And so I think that provides a great opportunity for us to say, because I think early on the idea was all this data is great, but this is my data and I can't share it because it's this and that. And I see that now people are starting to embrace to say, hey, look, if I can get my house in order, get my data well, there's a ton of benefit for me. But there's also benefit for my peers in the industry when I can go out and collectively share data that now is probably more than likely available publicly in some format, be able to share that so we can really do good effort with it. And so I really love that. As we're starting to kind of wind this down, I kind of want to just ask you a real simple question. What can like an individual or an organization do to kind of support the mission of the DPI to help ensure safer
Mhm.
excavation?
Well, what I can say is one, join, participate, get involved. We pride ourselves on good customer service, meaning good member support service, and because the DPI is new and because it's ours to build together. We want to bring in conscientious companies who are really focused on doing the right thing and believe in the model, right? So if you believe that what you and I are talking about has merit, and you really think that this is an opportunity for you to learn, grow, change, and help the industry broadly, get involved, participate, and shape what this program looks like. It's new. I mean, the sky's the limit. We can do some really fascinating and wonderful things if we collectively decide that we want to. And here's our opportunity to do it. It is going to take some effort, blood, sweat, and tears on the part of every participant in the DPI. They're going to have to measure things that perhaps they haven't measured before. They're going to have to build some processes for submitting data to us on a monthly basis and making sure that that data is high quality. But all of these efforts really will drive, I think, companies to better improve, better performance overall. So that's one thing. Once you're in the DPI, one of the interesting models, or one of the most important components of participation and accreditation is peer review. And we have piloted now in January peer reviews for about 20 excavators. We've done, I'd say, 6 sessions total, and we tested different models of bringing excavators together to have round robin discussions about key topics in damage prevention, and especially key topics that are of interest to excavators. And in this pilot, we asked all of our DPI participants, would you like to participate in this pilot? Would you like to help shape this? Would you like to see what this is all about? And as you can imagine, peer reviews scare people badly, right? So they scare people. What is this going to look like? Am I going to have to air dirty laundry? Are people going to be, looking under the covers here? So what we found instead is that these are opportunities for companies to really understand how they can improve their performance without even beginning to give away any kind of trade secrets or any kind of competitive advantage. These are smart things that companies are doing. And when you go around a room with serious contractors, whether they be small, medium, large, it doesn't matter, and you say, what does your damage prevention structure look like? How do you do it? And then they all say, well, this is how we do things. You suddenly see light bulbs going off. Everybody in the room's going, oh, that's interesting, right? One of the participants in the peer review said it felt like 5 to 6 hours of free consulting on how to improve my business and my bottom line. Now, That's great for an individual company. But what it really is an opportunity for companies to understand how their culture and how their programs and processes impact the entire industry. Right? One of the most fascinating things that came out of one of the peer reviews was one of these contractors said, and of course I will not name them. These are all completely and totally private conversations. There are non-disclosure agreements that are signed. Nothing leaves the rooms. This is an opportunity to really just talk about how you can get better. But one of the contractors in that room said, we did a real hard look at how we were using the 811 system and how we were managing our tickets. And they discovered that they were submitting on a periodic, regular basis, as required by law, 400 tickets that were in. There was no work to be done on those tickets. The work was done. The contract got canceled, whatever it was. And the process is set up a situation where they had, a whole bunch of tickets that they were submitting on a regular basis. There were just a lot of noise in the system. Now locators have to run out and locate and mark these facilities. Owner operators have to respond to the tickets. Noise, 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 waste,
Right.
waste, waste, and waste that can pretty
Right.
reasonably lead to excavation damage elsewhere because resources are being pulled away from the real
Yes.
work. To hear that company say, "Yeah, we figured that out and we cleaned up our act," and having a lot of other companies go, "You know what? We probably have a similar challenge." That starts to snowball. And now that misuse of the 811 system, those that over notification or that just misuse, just generally misuse of the system, really starts to resolve. And of course, that's one of the biggest next practices that
Yeah.
CGA is advocating proper use of the 811 system. We've got to restore confidence in the 811 system, and that's a component of it. So peer reviews, I mean, I have such high hopes for these peer reviews, and I really think that the contractors that I think very much you know who you are for participating in that peer review program, you know, it is producing some really interesting results. And as we scale up that peer review program in the months to come and in the years to come, I think we're going to refine that process to the point where people are going to be eager to sit down with each other and say, how do I do this and how can I get that?
That's great. Hey, I really appreciate the time today. I've just over the past, I guess, year or so, we've really gotten to hang out a little and get to know each other. Really impressed with what you're accomplishing at the DPI. I love the work the CGA is doing. We're always incredibly huge supporters. It's interesting on what you said there. There's a couple great points that I think it would be fun to
Yeah,
take offline
yeah,
and have a conversation about because I really think there's some great opportunity. And as a guy that does a lot of work with one call centers and knowing some of the challenges they're facing, how to address that from the inception of when that idea starts to where it goes today is incredibly intriguing. So I think I'm glad you brought that up. It's a good thing for us
yeah.
to continue that conversation. But again, I don't want to take any more of your time. It's been wonderful. So I want to just say thank you again and
Thank
really
you, Jason.
enjoyed
I
this
really appreciated
conversation.
being here. Thanks so much for the invitation.